Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar event. My name is Joshua. I'll be your presenter today. It is promptly 11:30 Eastern Time. We're going to go ahead and get started on our webinar here. We're here to talk about paying bills in Church Windows Accounting, pursuant to our webinar a couple of weeks ago on entering bills. We're going to be talking about just paying bills today. So before we get started on that, a few things. Click the little red arrow on the sidebar of your webinar control panel. That allows you to minimize that, get it out of the way, see the full visual presentation of our webinar. Or if you've got a second desktop or monitor, just go ahead and drag that off to the second desktop. We're going to be here for the next 20 minutes or so talking about paying bills. Wherever I am, I'm going to wrap things up at 20 minutes. You have 20 minutes and see what we can't do to get questions answered for folks. If you have questions, please type those into the questions war portion of the webinar control panel. I will repeat the question for everyone's benefit, and I'll see what I can't do to get those questions answered for you. Okay. I simply ask that you do keep the questions topical, meaning on our topic of pay bills today. If you have other questions about other portions of Church Windows, either please call technical support or maybe register for another webinar that is on the topic that you have questions about, okay? We are recording today's event. It will be available on our website here on the Support Center page, probably sometime either later today, by no later than tomorrow, most likely. So you'll be able to revisit this. The workbook that we're using pages are from A103, pages 27 to 33. So if you have the A103 workbook, you can, those pages 27 to 33 are what I'm using as the guide for our webinar presentation today. If you're interested in those and you don't have the workbooks, you can go to the workbook page on our website and purchase those workbooks and download those at any time. Okay, let's go into accounting here. So again, as I said, that we've done a webinar on entering bills, okay? So we're here to talk about paying bills. So again, as we always like to make sure that folks are aware of, is that entering and paying bills, typically 95% of the time in Church Windows, sometimes more, sometimes less, is a two-step process. One of entering bills and two, paying bills. So we've already done the enter bills process. We're here to talk about paying bills today, okay? So we're going to jump into pay bills, okay? So when we go into pay bills, the assumption here is, and we're making this assumption today because they are true, we have already entered some bills and we're ready to turn around and pay those, okay? So we have a couple different options for when paying bills. As the middle of page or top of page 27 indicates, when we go into transactions, well, if we go up to transactions and we can go to pay bills up here, or we can just go to the icon in the middle and click pay bills, it opens up the same pay bills screen, okay? When we go into pay bills, this is essentially an empty screen until you make some selections, okay? You have numerous choices here. You can choose a specific single vendor or payee to pay in the upper left corner here, or more commonly what folks do, and this is what I will use more often than anything else on my support calls, is this option down here, the right side, called Quick Pay, okay? So when we click on Quick Pay, it brings up a menu with three choices: bills entered today, view vendors with a balance, and view outstanding bills. So if you have gone to enter bills and posted bills and just simply chosen post as opposed to post and pay, let's say you enter the bills in the morning, you go to lunch, you come back in the afternoon and you're ready to pay those, we would click on Quick Pay, bills entered today, and it would bring up the bills that we have entered today. Okay, so I've entered these half a dozen bills earlier today, okay? We're going to go ahead and discard that, and we're going to come back into pay bills. The other option here is view vendors with a balance. Now this is not necessarily going to be, this is going to be any vendor or liability with a balance, folks. So this is going to be those that I had entered bills for. It's also going to be other vendors or liabilities with a balance, more commonly things like our payroll taxes, or pass-through monies, monies that come in from donations are sitting in a liability to ready to pay. But again, this is also going to be perhaps a combination of both those bills that we've entered, as we've clearly seen, we've got some here, Christian Bible supplies and Columbia Gas, and those are the ones that I have entered bills for. But things like flex spending or mortgage payable for a church loan or mortgage, pension payable, state taxes, those are other accounts where bills are not the source of the balance. Okay? So how I would typically pay those is I would say, okay, I'm ready to pay my crop walk pass-through. I would put a check mark there, click Create Payments. I then click here where it says Amount to Pay, and I put in the amount that I want to pay. Whether it's the balance or something more, something less, it's entirely up to me. Okay? When you choose vendors that don't have a bill entered, the balance of that is just automatically set to 0. Okay? So let me go through that again. When we go up to Quick Pay, view vendors with a balance, when I say choose something whether it's my payroll taxes or my crop walk or what have you, there was no bill entered for those. So when I click the Create Payments, notice that the amount to pay in the middle is 0. It doesn't assume that I want to pay the balance of that account. I may not want to pay the balance. Maybe I want to pay something different. Again, something more, something less. Okay? Finally, when we go up to Quick Pay and view outstanding bills, this is going to reveal a list of any of the bills that I've entered that are not yet paid. Okay, so again, these are those same bills that I had come up when I chose bills entered today. If there were others that I had entered on other days and not yet paid, they would show up in this list too. Okay, so we notice here we've got some real true vendors here, but my tax liabilities for 941 taxes or state or pension payments for employees from their payroll, those don't show in this list. They're not bills. These are only transactions which are recorded when we go through the enter bills process. So simply, all I do is put a check mark down the left-hand column next to the bills that I want to create or post payments for, and I simply click Create Payments. I can do them all if I wish. Okay? It's entirely up to you. You pretty much have full control here, folks. Okay? So when I do click on that, it then adds these vendors to the list of unposted payments batch. And it does automatically populate the amount to pay with the respective invoices that I've checked, okay, or the bills. So notice here as I'm clicking on each one of those vendors, the little Pay Now box is checked saying, I am now ready to record the payment for this particular bill or invoice, okay? Notice here when I go up to AT&T, I have 2 bills entered for them and I only checked 1. This is, again, the level of control that you have to determine which bills you want to pay and which ones you don't, okay? So if I only wanted to post the telephone payment for AT&T today and not the internet fee, I absolutely have the control to do that, provided I've entered the bills to support that, okay? If I do want to pay them both, I can just simply put a check mark in the Select or Pay Now box for that, and notice it adjusts my amount to pay to the combined total, okay? Finally, on page 29 here, it talks about select vendor / payee to pay. And what that's referring to, again, is the very first thing I talked about, and that's the one up here in the upper left, where it says select vendor / payee to pay. All right? So when we click on that down arrow, this is going to show a list of any vendor or liability that I have in my chart of accounts. Notice my liabilities show up with the 200 account. As I scroll through the list, they're interspersed amongst my other vendors. They list here alphabetically by account name. If I want to, I can click on account number and notice it puts the liabilities at the bottom and all my vendors listed above it. Okay? But any vendor or liability with a balance is going to appear here, and those that don't have a balance. So really what it boils down to here is if I choose one of my vendors that has a bill, like my AT&T, it's going to add that to the batch and allow me to check those boxes. But let's say I want to make a payment from a vendor that I don't have a bill entered for today. I want to make a payment to the food bank today preliminarily, so I highlight or choose that vendor. Again, I want to point out the right side here, the balance, the account, the column to the middle here called balance shows 0. I haven't entered a bill, or there's no money in that Cap City Food Bank account to pay. I can still pay a bill and print a check for them. So I choose that vendor, click Add to Batch. Again, it doesn't presume to have the balance entered, so I have to type in how much I want to have on their payment. Okay? What will that do, you say? Well, what it'll do is it'll make the vendor balance negative. So if we now click the Show Running Balance in the upper right corner, let's expand that window a bit here. Let's drag that down, and we notice right here, Cap City Food Bank, right here, shows a negative $250. So maybe I'm receiving giving from members that's coming over from donations, or I want to enter the bill next month for that, but I want to get a payment out the door for them today. Yes, that is going to leave under balance under accounts payable on my balance sheet until I deal with that. But the software is flexible enough to support that should you absolutely need it. Okay? All kinds of control here. All right? Please use this Show Running Balance button. It's everywhere in Church Windows. It'll help minimize mistakes. Notice here that under all of my accounts, virtually all of the vendors that I've paid, with the exception of Cap City Food Bank, are all showing about adjusted balance of 0. That means I'm clearing out the account balance through the payment that perfectly offsets the subsequent bill or account balance, as the case may be. Okay? This window helps minimize mistakes. It allows you to see whether it's having the desired effect on your accounts before you post the transaction. Okay, so if maybe I wasn't paying attention and I go, oh, my Cap City Food Bank, I didn't realize that balance was going to be negative. I thought I'd entered a bill for them. Well, they're not. So I can then either save my payment batch and close out, and then go back in and enter my bill, and then come back in and add them back in, and and post the payment here and check the payment for that, the Pay Now box, or I can let it ride. It's my database, my control. Okay? But you always want to make sure that the amount to pay right here in the amount to pay column is the amount that you're wanting on your payment. All right? So page 30 talks about completing the payment. And so what that is referring to here is, if we're kind of moving, and I like to say this on my support calls, is moving from left to right. Okay? Let me get my highlighter out here. Left to right, okay, is you move across the page and you're checking that each one of the columns is showing the proper information. Okay, so starting on the left, is the date occurred correct for each one of the transactions? It defaults to today's date, okay? So if I want, it defaults to 9/3 because that's the date on our computer, but let's say I want to make my, Cap City Food Bank payment, Thursday. So I can just click here on that one particular payment, click the down arrow, and I can change the payment for that one single payment to any date I wish, okay? I always like to recommend that you click on each one of the vendors where they have bills and make sure that the Pay Now box is checked to ensure that the invoice is cleared when all is said and done. Okay? Is the asset account correct? Okay? So again, let's say my Christian Bible Supplies payment is made out of a different asset. I can click in there and I can choose a different asset account for that one single transaction if I wish. Otherwise, the system is going to default to whatever the default asset is. Again, continuing to move further right, check the amount to pay, make sure that the payment method or amount to pay is correct that you're wanting on your payment, whether it's an EFT transaction or a computer check or what have you. Again, moving further right to the payment method, and we want to make sure that the payment method is what we're wanting. So we have ours set as computer checks. But if I don't, I can change them to manual checks for all of them. But keep in mind, I would only do that if I'm actually handwriting my checks. Okay? This just helps save time for selecting a particular payment method when virtually all of your payments are made a specific way. Okay? But again, let's say my Columbia gas bill is paid electronically. I can just click right where it says computer check, choose EFT, and I've made that, posted that payment along with all the rest as an EFT entry or transaction while still continuing to post my computer checks. What this essentially means is, because I work with this a lot with folks, is I have folks that basically come in and they go, well, I post my EFT payments in one batch and my computer checks in another. You don't have to do that, okay? As long as all of the bills are entered or the payments are properly, arranged or set up for each one of the vendors with the amount to pay, I can make an individual commingle my computer checks with my EFT payments and any other payment methods I wish. Now I can't do, like under my AT&T, I can't say, okay, I want the telephone bill in one payment to be posted as a computer check and the other to be paid as an EFT, not simultaneously. I could post the one payment, then come back in and post the second payment choosing a different payment method, okay? If I do choose manual check as my payment method, I must enter a checker reference number here, folks, okay? If it will not let me post anything here if I don't have a check number entered when manual check is selected as the payment method, okay? Moving on to page 31, it talks about transaction comments. So if I have comments that I want to bring over from the bill, oh, I'm sorry, folks, I thought I had some in here. I would append those comments in here from the bill into the payment. There it is, transaction comments. So right here's my AEP bill. I'm sorry, they're right here under INS. So here are my bill transaction comments that I can now append to my payment if I wish. Okay, so I click append payment, append to payment comments, click OK. Now notice it shows up under my transaction comments here. And notice when I choose a bill or a vendor where there are no transaction comments, it warns me that, okay? So here are others, okay? So I can come down the list and add them all if I want. Okay, what that'll do is it'll put the comments on the actual stub of the check. The system doesn't automatically copy those bill transactions to the payment. You'll have to select those each and every time, okay? If I don't want to pay a particular vendor, we're on page 32 now. If I don't want to pay them, I go, oh, I didn't really mean to pay this vendor today. I can highlight them, click the Do Not Pay Selected Vendor button in the bottom left-hand corner, right down here, okay? So if I choose that, it'll say, are you sure you don't want to pay American Electric Power at this time? I click yes, it removes it from my payments batch, okay? All right, so finally on page 32, we've got about a minute left here. I'm going to close out. I'm going to save this batch, and we're going to go back to, it says batch was saved successfully. If we go back to enter bills, and we click on enter bills, and I choose a particular vendor from the list, and I enter a bill for them, not contributions, Josh, building fund expense. There it is, education building expense. I've got a bill for the plumbing repair company. I do done add to batch. I can choose post and pay these bills. So what that allows me to do is to go ahead and post the payment bill transaction. I want to say no to print, and then it'll automatically open up and create the batch of bills that I've posted at the previous window automatically, okay? A lot of folks, if you were living and working on a cash basis, that's the closest we have to a cash method of paying bills in Church Windows accounting. You'll be using post and pay these bills a fair amount, okay? But if you're not, you can always enter the bills today, earlier today, tomorrow, next week, next month, and then come back in and pay them at a different time if you wish. All right, folks, it is 11:50. I am finished with my topic for today. Thank you.